Excuse me. So you guys, it might be at a small, who was here for my first session on Helion? I know you got, okay, so this was like part 2 of a part 1 session. In that one, I did a demo of HP Helion, which is a PaaS product. In this session, what I want to focus on is basically what developing for HP is like, what the enterprise world is, and if there's a difference in how you guys are who develops here, who's an developer per se, others have interest in it. Would you say the rest of you are learning or just trying to understand it? Okay, so that's an important piece. For example, let's start with a story. There was a group of people that did a research on global warming, and they were looking for contributing factors to what global warming was. And one of the things that they identified was software development. Now what they found was that as education and methods in software development became poorer and poorer, it contributed to basically what's called hardware sketch or hardware rise, in where a lot of application code was developed quite poorly. It had memory leaks, it wasn't using system processes effectively, it wasn't using system hardware effectively. So inevitably, to scale this application, to get more people to use it, the solution was to continue throwing hardware at it, right? So hardware got, which was good for hardware advancement. This pushed a lot of hardware, just like video games. Video games pushed hardware, development pushed hardware, and we got lots of new iterations. But theoretically, if everyone had coded perfectly from day one, we would be further behind in our technological advancement. We'd have slower processors, we'd probably have slower hard drives and things like that, which that was good. However, we have a lot of excess waste that's built up in landfills, and that contributes through the line to global warming, poor production, poor recycling of a lot of these components. But the fact of the matter is that there is a large divide between a college graduate developer and a developer for Ubuntu or HP or say Microsoft. There are differences even in the enterprise world between development teams. Is anyone familiar with Yammer? Has anyone ever heard of a product called Yammer? Okay. Their development team got bought by Microsoft just because they could push code 30 times a day. They were one of the only businesses in IT that could push it that fast without it breaking, which is a concept called continuous integration, right? And what continuous integration allowed for was teams to commit multiple times a day. And they committed it against a build system such as Jenkins. Who's here heard of Jenkins? Okay, so that's something that has to change. Because if anybody here intends to develop or affect performance in an enterprise world, and not that it's bad if you don't. I'm not harshing on that. Some people are going to do mobile dev, it's going to be single operator development, and that's going to be fine, or business development for their own startups, and that's fine. But if you want to operate at scale and on large teams, if you can't use Jenkins, you can't develop. If you can't use continuous integration or some form of extreme programming, you're not going to fit in that world, and your app is going to take far longer to deploy, and it's going to be far less effective when you actually get it deployed. So one of my call to actions is to discover Jenkins, to use it personally in your own development projects, and to learn how to utilize it well, and why that's important at the enterprise level. So here, everyone here has used Git before, right? Git plugs straight into Jenkins. So as you have your code repository, Git actually takes multiple users' Git repositories, combines it, it runs unit tests against those automated builded unit tests. What's a unit test? Right? Some of us may not use that. A unit test is something that's written, it's a software piece that's written to develop or to check if your code is any good. If it has errors in it, if it has inconsistencies, if it's going to fail often, if it has performance leaks, if it has memory leaks, and that's a process known as QA. So in a traditional legacy development environment, how you develop is a bunch of people write code, they submit it, you try to mush the integration in at the end, and then you do the quality control checks at the end. They've determined that this is far too slow. Continuous integration, people are committing daily and daily. The unit tests are being run as they commit. The unit tests are being run as they commit, and then that code is checked into the repositories, developed, checked against performance metrics. The entire team of developers, as the code is submitted, is informed that those changes have been made, and then that application goes to production, or through the normal staging processes of staging, development, production. Now, why do I want you to learn about these new methods of, so I'm just writing a bit here as well. Why do I want to learn you about this different method of, of development? Hewlett-Packard in general, in my discussions with my boss and our marketing team, one of my goals at the Hackathon and the products that we push is to push Helion Development Platform, which is our product, which is a platform as a service product. And I can continue talking about its advantages and its features and its bonuses and giving marketing materials and sliding materials, but until we kind of get together and understand how to do cloud native development, it's not really useful to you yet, right? So most of us have or will develop in the legacy. This is non-microservice applications that are built to scale at the hardware layer. Meaning they're entirely dependent on the hardware, and in order for these scales to happen, the hardware just has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. This is also an example of, as you would say, a vertical scale. So you scale this vertically, adding more hardware, adding more hardware, adding more hardware. The second and more important development type to me right now is cloud native application. This is broken down into microservices. Storage is built into databases more frequently instead of tied to the actual web server. Why? Because a database can be used by multiple things. The storage on the web server can really only be used by that actual web server. So if you try to scale that application over onto a second node or a third node or a fourth node, your storage system is kind of bumped. Cloud native applications really don't care about the hardware that is underneath them. This can be different types of operating systems, it can be different types of hardware, it can be different kernels, instruction sets, it doesn't matter. The cloud, a cloud native application as it's developed has been developed to take care of whatever underlying infrastructure. So it could be EC2, it could be public cloud from HP, it could be Helion Development Platform, it could be Staccato, it could be Azure. You could also talk about Heroku on any of these platforms. If it's been developed natively, it can scale to any of these transmission, and there are different advantages and use cases to using these deployment methods, as well as internally, externally, it doesn't matter. Some of it's price, some of it is performance, some of it's feature sets. But you can't start utilizing any of you can, but traditionally those who've tried to jam legacy applications into public cloud have had a really hard time. It's cost a lot of money, it's caused a lot of headaches, it's caused a lot of frustration. Back to the point of why. Hewlett-Packard wants to bring hackathons here, to this Code RGB area. We've done some in San Francisco, and we just did a Dev Week in San Francisco maybe 2 or 3 months ago, right? It's a big production, a lot of HP resources come out, and we host a hackathon. There's cash prizes, there's jobs that are offered out, there are networking opportunities that are put in, there's businesses that are started that day, because basically the mission or goal is to say, okay, well, you guys come up with an idea, we're going to pair you with a team of developers, the developers are going to develop that application, and HP is going to select winners. Those winners get funding, those winners get national attention, they get support from Hewlett-Packard, free resources, free marketing, yada yada. They are definitely looking for developer pockets of people who can do cloud native developments to bring hackathons to those areas, because they want to show the development community using that product to take it to some of the legacy companies that we work with already and say, hey, look, they're doing this great stuff, they're developing applications in a third of the time than your traditional development teams. That becomes marketing for us. So that's why we're interested in the small scale, in the small dev hackathon communities, because it translates well into the larger kind of enterprises and stuff that we're doing.
Is Jenkins kind of like in Azure? It has release management, so it has like continuous.
CIDC?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Azure has its own baked-in version of CIDC, again proprietary, so it's not going to work for platforms outside of Azure. Whereas Jenkins, you start there, Jenkins can still use Azure, but Jenkins doesn't limit you from being able to use OpenStack or Staccato or Heroku or any other engine underneath.
If your company is not using Jenkins, how do we developers get a hold of Jenkins?
No, Jenkins is an open source project that's
Oh, it
available.
is?
Right. So with Helion, remember when I gave you the demo of Helion Development Platform? We had all those individual softwares that could be pushed with a one-button push. Jenkins is one of those projects, just like WordPress and Joomla and CMS. So it can be deployed locally on your own instance. It can be deployed on an Azure instance. It can be deployed through HTTP, the development platform there, at any given time, and you can use it. You can start interacting with it. So one of the things there's two kind of links that I'll bring up here, and I know it's small, but if you basically just Google build a software project with Jenkins, this basically shows the beginning steps that you want to use coming into working with Jenkins, right? Jenkins can be pushed onto any local server, a VM. If you've got Ubuntu, there's installation instructions on how to push Jenkins up. Excuse me. If you want to work with it locally before you try like getting it. For you, it'd be a good idea to put it on an Azure server, get your employees to start taking a look at it, start using it, especially for group development. At CodeRGV, I really want to have a smaller hackathon before we really involve, bigger companies, and use Jenkins in those hackathons to show an example of how multiple developers can work on one release project or one piece of software. Which, have we successfully done that? Other than the already established development teams, have we had any devs get together and start doing integration or no?
Internally at CodeRGB, we do get people involved in projects, but general mass public, the closest we've gotten is the social gatherings and projects that people work on.
Right.
But I guess the other example would be this breakout session that Josh is doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really going to be up to each instructor to create the curriculum and the necessary lecture, like the follow-up thing, basically.
Right, so we haven't done it. We've probably done a little bit. If people have been working collectively on a project, it's probably been through Git or whatnot.
Yeah.
Jenkins is like Git advanced with a lot more features instead.
I think the thing is, we still don't know, like, who's doing Ruby on Rails, who's doing Visual Studio, who's doing PHP.
What's important to know, and that'll introduce me to the next, the next thing that really all of I need all the developers out of CodeRGB to understand, which is 12-factor. So 12-factor is kind of like the Bible that has been written on cloud-native application development. This is the new style of development that I'm talking about, and it's 12 factors when designing your app. That if you take in consideration those and follow those 12 factors, that application will be cloud portable. It'll be truly almost like cloud certified. It doesn't matter. Cloud native development is not tied to a language. There's nothing about the factors that they're asking you to employ that ties it to a development language. That just becomes what you want. And in fact, if you're doing a 12-factor app development, you can somewhat change there's like a base of like, if you're in Python, you can pretty much switch it to C or Java or other applications, and it will take care of some of that translation for you, or make it a lot easier on you. So I'm really hoping that, and unfortunately, the details of that would probably be a week-long course to a 2-week-long course. I can't get into the drop-down things, but I did kind of just want to point out really what this Bible has been oriented toward. Basically, we want to offer maximum portability between our environments. We want to make sure that our applications are suitable for modern cloud platforms, right? So that if we say push to OpenStack Public Cloud or push to Helion Development Platform, that we don't have that there's no problems, there's no translation problems, right? There's no reason that the app can't be written to be Azure compatible, to be OpenStack compatible, to be EC2 compatible. If it follows these steps. We want to minimize divergence between development and production. We want to bring in continuous deployment. And we want to be able to scale without having to make significant changes to our architecture, to the amount of hardware that we use, to how we not only how we scale it, but how we monitor it, how we break fix it, how we make it highly available. All of those things become our afterthoughts, right? And in a developer's mind, and I understand, in a developer mind, often we're just thinking about, well, we got to make the application work. this 12-factor style is really kind of saying, take it easy on the system ops guys, start thinking about some of these scaling problems, and stop putting your applications and storage on the servers, because we can't scale that. And if you do, it's only going to make the company have to spend more money, it's only going to have to make us, our jobs harder. And it's just that kind of circling the wagons of saying, look, if you develop microservices, if you treat your logs like event streams instead of just logs, it releases so much problems that we have down from development to staging to production to monitoring to break fix to emergency, incident procedures and management. It takes all of those problems that are going to come through that life cycle, and it's easy to get tunnel vision as a developer. I mean, as a systems op guy, it's easy to get tunnel vision as an op guy. And what you have is a problem, which is a problem for everybody, and then you have ops guys blaming it on the developers, you have developers blaming it on the ops guys, and it just becomes a big mess and nothing really can solve. This method, not only are devs asked to take these factors into consideration, the ops guys are asked to do the same thing. So me, as not a traditional developer, as an ops guy, I'm taking these things into consideration when code is being brought to me to push and to keep their systems up, and I can do it all day long. And it makes the marriage between what we're trying to do together a lot easier. And it kind of comes down into breaking these, and we'll just kind of go real quick, because I hate reading to people. This website is there, it's on the public internet. I'm imploring all of you to read it, especially those who want to get involved into some of the larger hackathons and group coding projects that we're going to get into, because the expectation is that we be able to use. Go ahead.
What type of program do you run at the hackathon?
So we haven't run a hackathon specifically, but theoretically the structure is we're going to have idea people, right? So there's going to be those who create an idea. Maybe we'll use this new guy's app and we'll go grab some of those ideas. There's going to be a project manager who's going to play the role of project manager, and then a development team. So it could be a mobile app, it could be a cloud app, it could be, some other type of thing.
How much time do they have to do it?
Hackathons are usually from 24 hours straight to a week, right? So out of San Francisco, sometimes they have like hack weekends, where basically one company will provide all the food and lodging, and they'll put all the developers into one place, and you're there for like 48 hours straight. You get they're sprints, and so you get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and you wake up and you just keep coding. Some people go to sleep. It's like a LAN party for developers.
We'll probably do a hackathon, a mini hackathon, like a 24-hour one.
Mini hackathons are over like the full course of a day, or like 8 hours one day, 8 hours over a weekend. So 8 hours on a Friday, 8 hours on a Saturday, 8 hours on a Sunday. But you have some pre-planning that goes into it, because you've only got so much time, and if you want to push a working app in that time frame, you've got to be very, very on task, on focus, and go ahead. On scope. And since the developers in our area aren't very used to working with a group of developers, so in my theory, my intention is if we can get some people behind Jenkins and 12-factor, these considerations, it's kind of like prerequisite homework, things to start working through. When HP comes down, when we do a mini hackathon to start, it'll be easier. And then once we get through 1 or 2 of those, when I bring HP down and say, okay, come down, let's do an HP-sponsored hackathon, let's get some big media attention on it, then we don't look like a bunch of guys who don't know what we're doing. Because right now, if we were trying to do it, it wouldn't be very successful. We're not, at this point as a community, we're not really great at just saying, okay, let's start developing a project today. Mm-hmm. Here's the Git repos, here's the Jenkins server, here's the Campfire application, here's an Agile Scrum development strategy, and go. We're not there yet. My initiative, or part of my goal over the next 2 months, is to get us there. Right? So I just said a bunch of, does anyone know what Campfire is? Exactly. Basecamp, Campfire, those are chat applications meant for the development kind of style or whatnot. It's meant to be able to kind of keep those developing at different locations together.
The modern one would be Slack right now, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, showing my ops in my ops silo, I don't know what the...
No, it really depends on the team, right? I think the biggest thing that we're trying to do at CodeRGB is we're just going to try to flood you with information. And people will like Jenkins. The other one is, there's another CI, I forget the name, but...
There is, they talk about it right here.
Yeah.
The internet stuff dying.
So they're probably trying to download Microsoft Visual Studio. Yeah, it's a couple of gigabytes. There's a couple of CIs. There's a couple of mobile
CI
platforms.
standing for continuous integration.
Yeah. So anyway, to be honest, I don't think that
Mercurial?
Michael and I really care what you choose. You can use HG, Mercurial. You can choose Subversion. We don't really care as long as the stuff gets done and we create projects out of it.
Well, I kind of care. I'm partial to Jenkins because it's what HP uses.
I
And for
agree.
my field, it's what a lot of enterprise
At
corporations
Google, we use Jenkins. So, to be honest, as long as it works, I think it's my number one thing. So, I'm able to acclimate to anybody's team because I'm familiar with the concept, and I think that's what we're trying to build during the academy sessions is concept building. So that way, when somebody says continuous integration, you're like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That is an important thing. Honestly, it's not. It hasn't been taught. I mean, at UTPA is Jenkins taught. I mean, at the development layer.
I'm not. Are you DPA anybody?
Is anyone doing computer science at STC, UTPA, anywhere in there? Have they said anything about continuous integration? Have they talked about
I think they use GitHub at UTPA last time. I wonder talking about
just GitHub, which is pretty standard. I would say this method of programming, both cloud native, 12-factor, and continuous integration, are really only the last year and a half developed.
Yeah.
So and even in the enterprise world, for God honest truth, in the enterprise world, there are multi-million-dollar development teams that are still developing in very inefficient and poor ways. This is exactly what I was talking about with the whole global warming concept cost.
I used a software called Plastic.
Mhm.
Heard about that one? That was similar to that.
Is it a CI program?
It's kind of like GitHub, I know, but it records everything, right? And all your developers submit the
Mhm.
project and work together.
Does it do unit testing as the code gets submitted?
I'm not that sure.
There's a repository, which is Git. All Git is a repository. Then a CI is a repository along with like team management, integrated unit testing, automated build processes.
Rollback.
Rollback. So it actually, as the code comes in, it actually deploys an instance version of that code and that runs unit tests, which is quality control. So it tries to break the code, and then if it breaks the code, it sends off alerts to the team. So it's not actually the Git is the repo, and Jenkins uses Git as the repo, but Jenkins just adds a lot of other really handy concepts and methodologies to diverse development teams, because you've got, well, there'll be a decision. I mean, in the hackathon community, we're supposed to be these really lethal, mobile, scalable group developers, and the tools to get us there we haven't heard of yet, which is kind of what I'm, addressing here.
And Visual Studio is the release management portion.
Travis.
The one that basically says if the unit
tests
testing
are passed,
passed, then go ahead and deploy to production, or you can
not
tell
to
it-
production, to staging, and then
yeah, but it can also say that the production's going to happen on the weekend, or you can tell it at what time it's
Mhm.
going to do the.
Well, you never push on Friday. You want to avoid Friday, but yeah, it would be Monday.
And to the first question you had, there are several different types of hackathons, and then there's just what we're going to do. Theoretically, we want to move from more just daily event to kind of month-long processes, tech startups, and the concept of okay, well, idea, project management, development, right? And so, ideas come in, they get assigned a project manager, those resources get paired off with development teams, those development teams start going and building products, right? So, this is and as Olmo and I have discussed, and a lot of this is very like, we are just shotgunning information out to you, we're bringing people who are talking about different concepts. I'm late to this conversation, it's probably one of the first conversations we should have had. However, I'm not a real developer. I develop in like Bash. I'm a scripter. I'm not really a developer. But in working, I work very closely with development teams to bring products online for HP, and I know how important this is to that amount of the team. And remember, these guys are brilliant and have been doing it a long time. And I would say without some of these higher layer assist tools and approaches, they really wouldn't be getting the amount of things done that are getting done. Now you can look at a model like Netflix. Like Netflix is an amazingly successful piece of software. They actually have something called chaos monkey that runs in their production environment. They are so sure about how they develop their code, they actually have a automated algorithm that sits in the environment that just turns stuff off. That's all it does, is it turns stuff off. All it does is break things, stop processes, restart processes at the wrong time, and turn stuff off. But they've developed that application in a cloud-native way in not being dependent on single services, single processes, single log streams, so that they can run that environment. And all it does is help them. And then what it does is it reports what it did, how long it took to recover from those things, how long it took to resume operations, how long it took the admin team to get those services back online.
Does it tell you if somebody else is already working on that?
Well, it's proprietary. I don't know exactly 100% everything it does, but it logs everything it does, and it gives them a consistent amount of data of
Yeah.
how to improve the environment.
There, I forget the project, but it does a similar thing, and it's open source. I can look it up and email. And
I know Lemon is one to teach yourself. There's a
well, no, the one that actually goes into the conditionals and like literally puts a false in there when you're expecting a true. And if it doesn't raise an exception, it'll actually tell you. If it does raise an exception and it was expected, then your passes. So it's like, I know we're getting into the unit testing and development, and basically TDD, right? Test-driven development. It really deserves its own class, just going over the concept. And to answer the question, to mention it though, like based on what you're saying, is there is an open source project that you can literally use right now that will take your code and break it for you, just like Michael was saying, and it's not proprietary. So I'll look it up and email you guys when I find it. I'll put it on the forum.
But I mean, why would you? It's a brilliant idea because all it does is consistently gives vision and feedback into where the application has vulnerabilities, where the whole production has capability.
Well, like, I'm starting a startup. It's a studio for gaming.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how would that help me?
To do for gaming development,
For video games.
doing independent video game development.
Yeah.
So are you gonna have multiple developers or one developer?
Well, right now we have two, but
Mhm.
we have space for one more like intern,
Right.
and we're starting there to get like more interns. We're getting involved with the city cabinets and stuff. But
Right, right.
We're already starting off. But
So video
we do
game
have a prototype already, and
video game development's a little bit different than normal web application development, but it's the same thing. And can Jenkins be used for
Yeah, it's for any. What is it running? C++?
yeah, the C++ with Unreal Engine.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Jenkins, all it does is it runs the test script.
Oh, okay.
Right. So
I've only ever seen it used for web apps, like web enterprise kind of apps and stuff like that. But it's the same basic concept of it's gonna teach you to use Agile and Scrum. It's going to force some better foresight of your project like before. And again, the cloud native. Oh, I'm sorry. I did this. The 12factor.net, like that, this kind of Bible, the exact Bible that I'm talking about. All of that's going to be very important because, like, remember when video games went from like StarCraft, where it was the multiplayer was peer-to-peer,
Yeah.
as opposed to what we've gone to with like World of Warcraft now, where we got like multi-regional data centers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
it's incredibly important when, I mean, World of Warcraft is actually very secure. Why is it secure? Because they test everything. They test the business model against it. So when people are ripping people off of gold coins, or they're mining, or they're doing something ridiculous, that's where you do the testing, basically. You want to create a test environment that protects your income. You can look at it like that. And whenever somebody enters a code, like an intern, they don't open a door where somebody else can go in and benefit out of it.
But again, I mean, anyone who's game to the room understands, like, when you want to, like, when there's a video game and it's online only, and you want to play that video game and the servers are down, and like, especially if it's an unplanned maintenance, like an emergency maintenance, and you know that personal frustration, it's the same thing that we're seeing in the enterprise world when, like, a person is running a costume website and he did a marketing blitz for the month of October, and if he has an outage in October, Halloween, like, costume shops make 90% of their revenue in 1 month. So if their application is down in that 1 month, they're losing upwards of $30,000 to $45,000, you know, every 20 minutes in potential revenue and earnings. And if that application is out for the day, that's that. So, in an example, you know, your video game, a lot of what the return business comes from, well, either you're Blizzard and you're just so well known in the industry, people will pay whatever, you know, whatever you put out there. You could put a Care Bear game out and they'll play it. But I mean, if you want people to reliably use that game, especially if you have any multiplayer segments, making the application very portable and not dependent on a hardware platform, what you put it behind, especially something like, you know, public cloud or OpenStack. Having these pieces in play is going to be very important. I mean, it's important to any app.
Like, what I want to do is get more people involved in my project, and so I can be directing what to do. You know,
We haven't had anyone talk about, I mean, I'm a gamer, but I can't develop.
I have a prototype and a small demo, you know, but if I would be to directing people, that would be a lot bigger.
So Jenkins, Git, GitHub, all these best
That'd be a good test
practices.
basis to get, you know.
It's
to
for
get
project
someone up.
management, all of these things. Because you as a project manager will look at the CI and say, what's the status?
Yeah.
Who broke it? Blame them, literally with git blame. And you as a project manager managing interns, you see what they're doing. You see who's crashing it more than fixing it. So you're like, this is not a good investment on this person. He just doesn't get it. So these are all tools that you can use in various ways. But you got to start using the tools. I mean,
but it's important because it's important that we know that they're there. We start paying attention to them, and we start trying to integrate them too. Because we have some very lofty goals.
it has to be part of the lifestyle.
And in order to get there, we have to start getting a couple of the bases done. And unfortunately, just by the way of the industry, a lot of the stuff hasn't been put in front of you yet. And we're cognizant of that. That's why we're talking about it right now. We're asking for you guys to kind of take it home, start consuming it on your own. The website's 12factor.net. You know, Jenkins, you just Google. We will try to, I'm not the best Jenkins teacher. I have better ones, but they're up north. And so we're trying to have you guys do a little bit of homework, because if I bring in a Jenkins instructor from HP or from Rackspace or one of my, you know, northern contacts, they're going to talk a lot more intelligently and a lot quicker about it. And if you have no primer on it, if you haven't even started using it, you're not going to get anything from it.
So this is where you guys need to give us feedback. What do you need for that to happen?
Yeah.
You need more time here? You need better resources, more working room? I don't know. Just
Demo platforms. No, I
you
have.
gotta tell
We
us.
talked last platform. I have an HTTP environment that's set up, and that's one of those engines that cloud native development can use. It's a it's a container-based deployment model. So you write a cloud native package. It's called the YAML, and they talk about if you read through the 12-factor, it talks about YAML development. That's a place you can push a YAML. So I'm going to make that available to people as they want to start using it, but we just got to cover some of these bases first. Is the ask. And we're not just asking of you guys alone, we're asking of the community at large. We're going to keep asking. I guess we're going to, you know, have some more targeted courses around it.
Yeah,
But
we
it's
will.
important those are going to be it's not going to be a 40-minute class. It's going to be a 2-hour to 8-hour.
Right now we're covering the basis. At
Yeah.
some point it will be very intensive courses.
And it's some of it's going to be, hey man, it's all frustrating to me. But
To me, what I would like to know is how to use the source code, like how to really manipulate it and make the source code. Not really scripting that much, more
Mhm.
of coding. That's what I would like to learn more.
Like manipulating
that's
the
going to
code.
come more from that's going to come more from like involving people on your team who are better at like that's not going to be a 1 hour and a half session from us. That's going to be getting integrated in the theory that the steps are kind of everyone figures out a deployment strategy, right? Let's all figure out if we're going to use Agile or Scrum. Let's all figure out if we're going to build legacy or cloud native. Let's all figure out what version control system we're going to use, what CI system we're going to use, you know, what project management software we're going to use. We get all that into, you know, then we start pairing off and get the developers together and have them develop in that way. And then naturally we're going to have the hackathons, and that's when you're going to get time. You may find a better developer who has like more intimate knowledge of manipulating that source code in that way. And then by knowledge share and transfer and actually sitting down and doing it. We're in the very theoretical right now. We want to start getting a lot more practical.
Mm-hmm.
We do need to continue to be a tad more theoretical and a tad more instructional, because we're not trying to throw you in the deep end of the pool and just expect you to swim. But
I would like that.
it's important. I cannot stress enough how important it is to get some of these premises really out of the way, especially for you. Like, and some of us are already we already have a running business that is making money and doing things all day long, and we haven't taken any of this we haven't taken testing into consideration. We haven't tested scale out. We haven't tested portability, and
I mean, that's why I'm here, because at work, there's nothing on Git. We're using, Subversion, and it's not even correctly. They're overriding each other and losing code.
because
and-
that's exactly my point.
Mhm.
In independent development that is not guided or directed, and I mean, it's a shame that everybody hasn't been able to see a perfect example. If everybody could have started in their development practice, it's like you played basketball but you never watched Michael Jordan. You're playing basketball, but are you playing the best basketball you can play? No,
Yeah.
you're not.
Like right now I'm using Cloud9, and I barely push my apps, and I'm learning about bundling and all this other, and having my configuration files there.
Mhm.
And the Visual Studio that we're using, it's like, if it's not using, if 4.5 is not already on the server, then you gotta wait a couple of weeks. There's gonna be some change management done, just so that they can install .NET because 4.5, because there's other applications there and you can't install it, And so we're waiting on some of these other ones where I can just, what am I pushing? And that's why I started learning Ruby on Rails, and I like how you have everything there, and then start pushing. And I finally pushed my first app to Heroku, and I'm starting to get away from Azure because there's a lot. I mean, it's like
But
if
you've
you're
seen
not
the
just
value
doing-
out of Heroku, because this is the same. Heroku is cloud native development. It actually bundles a lot of these things that you would have to actually do it just from a text document development strategy way. And Heroku has listed libraries, listed dependencies. Everything's already rolled up into
So now I'm
microservices.
doing more deploying from the command line and doing a lot of stuff
Yeah.
on the command line instead of from over here from Visual Studio. is
Drag and
just
drop,
going
click in here.
the
So there's
mouse.
in the industry there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
They're not all right. They're not all best for the company. Some are just used because of. I cannot tell you how many companies use a development strategy that was just something that an earlier developer got hired and set as a tone for the company, and it never changed. Because it's never going to change unless someone who knows better comes in above that layer. Because I get hired day one at my startup, and I like EC2 development. So I develop all my application at the EC2 API, which is a proprietary API, and then that startup goes and goes and goes. And even though there's far better ways to do development, who's gonna stop the train? Is it the new guy that gets hired in there? Because why aren't we using cloud native development? Why aren't we using a API abstraction layer in the front of it? And they're going to be like, well, this is what we do, and we can't stop, and we have to get our projects done. I can't tell you how often that happens, and it just
I
stays
have to be an
inconsistent.
expert before I even push anything to it, because my work is the type of different type of developers there.
Mhm.
Come 5 o'clock, it says, hey, if you're going to ask me to stay, I'm going to punch hours.
Yeah.
And it's not like, if you want me to read something new, I'm going to charge for it.
It's
And like,
one of the big. I work with it all the time. One of the hardest things is IT organizations eventually become what's called a train, and just they are going a direction, and that's the direction they go, and that's the way they get a product to market. Now, holistically, you can abstract from that. You can come in and say, look, I can reduce your deployment timelines by 60%. I can improve your highly availability. I can improve your unit testing. I can reduce your downtime. And sometimes they'll say, but we don't want to learn. We can't stop because we'll lose a $50,000 deal if we don't push this product out, in 2 weeks. So we don't have time to stop to learn how to do it the better way. That
our unit
happens.
testing consists of before deploying, the week before, a whole bunch of programmers go
Not
down
even
to
a
the
week
first
before.
floor and start trying to break it.
Continuous integration is about, at that moment, you get a test. Like at Google, they had hundreds of thousands of tests, and they keep being added every single time. And so every single time that you commit to the base,
Each of those tests.
it gets checked against all the tests.
Sometimes not all. Sometimes in batches, it picks 20% of the tests and runs it.
Well, the proprietary CI they had, oh yeah, it was.
Oh, theirs is a different thing.
Yeah, it's blazing fast.
The point is there's methods that we're using right now individually, and there's a vision that I think both me, Olmo, some of the more senior guys here have for us, and so it's going to take a little homework, a couple more classes, you know, some stressful times, but at the high level view of what we want to be able to do, it's going to do nothing but benefit you.
And FYI, on our end, what we're doing is we're partnering with for-profits and non-profits, and we're looking for real-world examples so that you guys can like when we're learning CI, when we're learning, deploying to HP Helion, we use what we're learning to launch what the for-profit or non-profit needs. And we're not gonna just pick any one of them. We'll look at democratically which one we're interested in, and then you'll have my support and Renee's support and all these other guys' support. And our hope is that Code RGB gives back to the community with a product, and you guys learn as you're doing it. Yeah. In a real-world example.
In that angle, HP is very interested in success stories of local hackathon, starts development, develops a great idea, deploys it on the HP Development Platform. We are begging for those stories, and so that why I'm here after hours. I want to help make that successful, make that possible. I'm here to do it. I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. That's fine. But showing the real value of why, we have to understand why and what's ahead of us, which is kind of what I took this session to really generally talk about. We have to get it to the community at large, which is going to be more which we have the video and stuff like that. That's fine. But as I said,
it's gonna take you guys basically, because the ones like you said, I think the word is seniors. The more senior ones of us, I mean, we're already there. We're kind of hoping that you guys start latching on and moving along, and so what I was going to suggest for you, like you're afraid of pushing it out to that enterprise environment.
Just work on it.
Just work open source. You're using Cloud9. I think that they have open source projects on it. Atom Editor is also open source. I don't know, like everything is open source now. There is no reason for you not to contribute back. And in particular because they'll actually review your code. They'll tell you your coding style is wrong. They'll tell you that you're missing the unit tests. They'll walk you through these 12 factors without you even realizing it.
Putting your code in the open, it's like leaving a wound and they'll put the salt and the lime in it. But it's the best thing for you.
You learn immediately and you get the sense of community really quickly. And it's a great investment.
Yeah, because what I wanted to do, one of the biggest issues, and it's just a simple app, but I don't want to do it in, let's say in Visual Studio, which is what we use or whatever. I wanted to do it something where what I'm learning I can push. So if I could, use Git, if I just use like let's say Ruby on Rails, because I want to start using more Unix, so I can learn that, and then start doing all the CI and everything. And basically, it's just that our help desk, whenever they get a call, they always have to be rounding up which developer is taking care of this application. It's like so many applications, and they're always just going around. And if they just have a web app where they have a list of applications and they click, okay, they call me about this one, okay, this is the lead.
It's no different at the bigger places than it is at the medium-sized places and the smaller places. There is a continuous amount of what I visually see in my head is this train movement, and it takes some real stock. I've seen companies pull it around. I've seen very disorganized development-oriented companies come to us, and they've contracted out. At a certain point, they've become so ineffective development-wise that they will hire a more effective development team to come in, clean house, reset up how their entire deployment strategy works, and then retrain their staff on it, and then go back to work. But they would have had to have put their work pretty much on hold for a period of time. We don't, as developers, you guys don't want to be there. You don't want to be in an interview where someone asks you, like, explain to me how you've worked on a continuous integration project. What happens during the process. Show me some examples of the code that you have on GitHub. So show me some contributions on Launchpad that you've had, and or worse, be hired by a development team. Not that everyone here is. A lot of people here are working on personal projects. Some may have interest in getting applying to Hewlett Packard, applying to Rackspace. There's quite a few development resources a little bit more north in San Antonio and Austin here. The worst thing you could do is get hired onto a team and they sit you down and give you a Jenkins login and you not know what you're doing. That's what happened to me at Rackspace. I got hired and they sent me a text document with a bunch of like Linux commands in it, and I looked at it and I said, I have no idea what the hell this is, but cool. And if I didn't have a great mentor, my friend Damian Green, who sat right next to me and pulled me through the worst of it, because I was from a Windows background. Nobody I went to STC. Nobody took me aside and said, hey, you should learn Linux. No one took me aside and said, hey, you should learn continuous integration, or hey, you should take a look at OpenStack, or open source projects. No one did. It wasn't until I was sitting in the chair just like this with a computer workstation and asked to actually do something that I realized how far behind I was. And that's a constant lesson that is in the back of my head. And one of the only reasons I'm here, in a sense, because if I can save a couple of people that dynamic, then I'll feel better about because it was somebody else who saved me, because I wasn't going to keep that job.
I think I'm getting good at Git. The only thing that I'm trying to work more on is on pull requests.
Mm-hmm.
Who needs to do the pull request, and because I don't want just anybody to push, or if I give them access, I want to be able to see the code and do all that. So not allow them to commit straight to the master, but as a pull request, and then tagging. That's the other thing. When do you tag?
Yeah, I did an intro to Git, and I can schedule a follow-up basically to that one.
Part of the
go over
problem
that.
is not all of us have been to every session yet, and some of it, and that's why we've been recording more and more of them for them to be like accessible and watched over. As I said, the last session I did on Helion Development Platform was recorded, so I've said it a couple of times. I really didn't even want to focus on it this way because this is one of my chief concerns. But we can go back and watch that one. We're trying to get every session recorded. Eventually, we're going to do some longer, 4 and 5 hour bracket classes.
Well, in particular, once we have the infrastructure, we'll have, VM with everything set up. And it's like, okay, guys, let's go to the work problem number, blah, blah, and literally, let me walk you through doing a pull request. Okay, Michael, you're gonna do the PR. I'm gonna wait for it. I'm gonna review it, and I'm gonna pull it. I'm gonna merge it, and literally, we'll go through the steps. But right now, we're not here nor there.
We're gonna get there. And then we'll throw Jenkins into it. We'll do the integration. That's something me and Om will do. But we can only do that so many times before we have to be able to consume that. I used to have an admin. There were several people who helped me become a better tech when I started Rackspace. There's another individual, Chris Bartels. He's a genius, engineer. He was an ops guy at the time. But I think the first time he'd ever helped me with something, he was like, well, bookmark it. It was a couple of days later, it was the same issue. I didn't bookmark it. And the same issue kind of came up, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just go ask Chris and say, hey, Chris, how do I deal with that issue? And Chris has a steel trap for a Marion and whatnot. And he upped me and down, with colorful words about why didn't I bookmark it. And at the extent, we're not here to give anybody a hard time or expect you to be at a certain place that's not almost intention, my intention. But that is a dynamic that's going to change when you're in a production team at your job. I'm sure, ignorance is not tolerated in a certain sense. In the workplace, if you ever become involved on a team or asked for money to produce a product or a ping, the training wheels kind of come off. And I don't want to foreshadow or hide that from the things. I mean, there is in certain aspects of certain roles, there is a lot of things you're expected to be able to do, and some of them you may not be ready for, and that's a whole different, whether you can learn on your feet or not. That's just a skill some people have and some people don't, and I've seen it.
The other thing good that we've done at work, we put OneNote on SharePoint, and so as soon as you open your OneNote, it goes to that, and we have everything, all our servers, all our applications, and how to install an application. Let's say we're installing extenders and applications.
Yeah.
How to install Oracle and what exactly.
Most companies will employ Wiki. I mean, we employ Confluence. It's very similar. It's probably Confluence is probably designed a little better for that functionality. Because OneNote just being kind of like a flat documentation grid, whereas Confluence has rules and permissions, so you can restrict access to teams that are only supposed to know how to do a certain thing, because you don't want to give someone how to break down the Nova server
Yeah.
if they're not really supposed to know. Even though that doesn't make sense, but it does. Like, you know, sometimes you give someone documentation on something and they think they can do it, but they're not ready to do it, and it happens, and then you're in trouble. But as I said, there is 50 bazillion ways to do almost everything that is commonly needed. And the problem is right now is that some of the things that are commonly needed aren't even common knowledge within our circle. And it's
We'll get
absolutely
there.
goal to get that.
We'll get there.
We will get there. Kicking and screaming if we have to.
You said you could give us some access to
The HTTP tab. So just give me with afterwards. I'll get your email and get you your login. And I mean, those who want that access or whatnot, if on this feedback you guys don't have feedback and say, I can't deploy the Jenkins server myself, but if you guys give me access to one, then I know that that's what's up, and I'll put one up in my cloud account, and I will give you access to that. And you know, it'll be a Wild West, and you know, not really used for production, but you will be able to get in there and use it. I 100% encourage you guys to go home and pour over 12factor.net. And give it to any of your friends that are development friends, anybody that wants to work with you in development, anybody here if they haven't read it, because we should all know this up and down. I've read it up and down. I still don't understand it all. I reread it every couple of weeks just to get back and figure it out again. It's not. This is not HP control. This is just industry control. This isn't some like weird marketing strategy or whatnot. This is nothing but to benefit you. And as I said, as you read through it, you're gonna hear terms that you probably haven't heard before, which is good because you need
Look
to.
it up. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Google it.
Google it. A little self-learning here, but you do that self-learning, and as we bring in the other couple, as me and Omo come in and show you how Jenkins works, I'm going to bring in some developers from up north, and I want you guys to be able to take as much of, because I can't get them down here all the time, and I want you to be able to take as much away from that as possible while they're here, but it's going to require a little bit of pre-homework on that.
Didn't Google used to have a service like that, but they recently closed it because everybody else was better?
Oh, code.google.com/p. Yeah, well, it was more a Larry Page decision.
It was one of the first projects like that, right?
Yeah, it was. There was SourceForge, and then there was code.google, and then eventually GitHub came around. I still remember that when I saw the video of Linus Torvald talk about Git, and he was talking in front of Google, and Google at the time was all about subversion. Okay, and when I was in Google, it was still the case that it was all about subversion. But inside of Google, they developed
it happens all the time. Like, I mean, Ansible right now is a lot easier to use than Chef and Puppet.
Yeah.
But most development teams are stuck around with Chef and Puppet, and then you've standardized on Chef and Puppet, and I mean.
I gotta tell you, like every single weekend, I have to learn something new, and that's the pattern you have to go into. I did the first class that I did was how does one learn a program. I give a bunch of tips, and it's online. I give a bunch of tips on how to stay up to date, and one of those is sign up to the GitHub alerts. It'll alert you for the trending projects, and I mean, to be honest, if the flock is going that way, you're doing yourself a disservice by not learning what's going on.
Well, research and development is a good thing.
Yeah, you have
You've
to.
seen Chef, so you're saying that everybody's moving to
Ansible.
Not everyone is moving to Ansible because a lot of people are just tied in and they've already learned Chef, and it's just I call it's technical lethargy, or like burnout is a big problem.
How do you spell that?
Which one?
Ansible?
A-N-S?
IBELE.
Ansible, Chef, and Puppet are all they're all configuration and package management.
Yeah.
It's a high level of automation where basically, theoretically, if you wanted to build your own automation thing, you could have package and instruction sets all written in Chef and Puppet. It's like a language of like, okay, well, it's like giving classes to servers. So I could give one server a class of like, you're a web head, so it gets a certain set of packages installed on it. And another one's a database server, so it gets a certain set of packages installed on it. So they get a Chef role, and then whenever they come online and it says, oh, that's a DB server, okay, install these packages. To reduce manual installation of these packages on those servers. Fantastic platform.
Yeah, and they monitor
But
themselves.
there's
And,
Ansible now. I heard there's a new one. I haven't even heard of it. packages will change, programs will change. There is a high amount of that.
Salt
I mean,
or
like,
something like that?
there was like cookbooks. I mean, there was salt. There was cookbooks.
Isn't
Oh
that
yeah,
how
salt.
passwords-
Salt.
Isn't that how passwords, that if you tell it, you click on the WordPress, and it'll.
Oh, on
use
HP
that,
The
Helion?
great thing about
and it starts using-
cloud native development, and when you go through, it's talking about YAML based development, and we talked about this in the first session. That is going to be a standard that Chef uses, that Heat uses, that
Ansible.
Ansible uses. This is a very important format to learn and to understand. If you're going to be writing code and you're not writing it as a YAML, which is exactly what 12factor.net is going to tell you, then you are making a mistake, because this is where, and a YAML file is different from just pure code, because instead of writing code and saying install dependencies, you just list dependencies. You say Apache, MySQL, Nginx. You say, those are my application dependencies. Here's my application. Here's where to use it. Okay, cool. Now I can push that code into HP Helion Development Platform, and it goes and does it. I don't have to log into any servers and install MySQL. I don't have to log into any servers and install Nginx. I don't even have to configure them. Most of the configuration variables you handle at the definition file. And this definition file can then be used by Heroku, Helion Development Platform, Heat, Jenkins, EC2. There isn't an engine right now that is a cloud engine, Cloud9, Azure, that cannot use that deployment methodology. So you've taken care of so much portability work for yourself that, I mean, the value is insurmountable. Because if your boss asks you, well, somebody came in and sold this, Azure, top-down level, I work in sales. Top-down decisions are a big problem for devs and apps, right? What's a top-down decision? How does it affect the developer? A top-down decision is, I'm a sales guy, you're using Chef. I come in and I talk to your CEO. He doesn't talk one word to you, and all you know how to do is Chef. He doesn't say one word to you when he decides to buy my product, which is Ansible, and then changes the entire company to Ansible. You cannot use Chef anymore, we have to use Ansible. We bought it, I paid $2 million for it. That happens all the time. And if you don't stay ahead of it with independent-based configuration management, with stuff that is not proprietary, one day you could find yourself in that hole of having to learn an entirely different technology. Because you could go here and be fine. Or you could just relearn everything as it comes along. Chef, Ansible, Salt, Cookbook.
And critique it. You're a part of a community, you can critique it.
And that's fine, they're all great platforms and all good to know about. But I myself would like to save myself a little bit of trouble on the back end.
I think even now on Visual Studio 2015, it has that where it'll say requires this, requires this. So if your app doesn't have it, as soon as it gets deployed, it starts grabbing.
You gotta remember, I hate this stuff. Like I left Microsoft behind a long time ago, so I don't know if it's probably dependency-based packaging. I don't know. Do you know if it's a YAML format?
I'm not a Microsoft guy either.
Yeah, I know. Well,
Josh just left.
We'll conclude it. I'll stay around for questions if you guys have questions. But I mean, it's getting late and stuff with that. But yeah, that whole. I wish I didn't hate, not hate. I didn't unenjoy using Microsoft development stuff as much as I do. Great for gaming.
All right, let's thank our speaker.
Thank you.